What's good, everybody? Welcome into Inside the Green Room with Danny Green. I'm Harrison Sanford. You guys already know the vibes. It is playoff time in the National Basketball Association. Before we get out of here, we're going to recap everything that we've seen between the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Dallas Mavericks as they go on to game number 5 now after the Minnesota Timberwolves avoided a sweep. But before we get to that, there's other action happening in the world of the NBA not related to the playoffs. And first, we'll start with one Bronny James, who, as of Wednesday, May 29th, is officially going to stay in the NBA draft. No more college ball for LeBron James' oldest son. Now, there have been multiple reports about where he can get drafted, second round, he could be undrafted. There's so many different perspectives on what Bronny can be in the NBA and things of that nature. Rest assured, Danny, there's a solid chance, or there's a good chance, that Bronny could have ended up as a first-round draft pick if he played better basketball in college next season. However, he is taking the risk and deciding to be a draftee this year. As a man who stayed in college for 4 years to improve your draft stock, albeit you still ended up in the second round, how do you view Bronny James' decision to stay in the draft?
It's an easy one, man, because it's way different than my time. Bro, he's making money regardless of where he goes. I mean, me and you have had debates, you know, about whether or not women should stay in college because they may make more money there than they do in the W. This is a no-brainer for Bronny. His dad doesn't have a lot of time, and I think it's more so his family's decision ultimately than his. He doesn't really need college. He's been making money in college. He may said if he went back, he would still make good money. I think just him being an influencer, his influence on social media makes him a lot of money. He can get sponsors just because of the family name. I do think it'll help his basketball growth, but I think he can grow just as well if he has the right situation. The draft is we all look at the draft like how much it really doesn't matter. It's all about timing, situation, and those things more so than it is how high you get drafted and how much money you're making. No, if you're getting drafted to the right team, making the least amount of money, then it makes sense. It doesn't matter what the money you're making. I'm saying if you're drafted last, as long as it's the right fit, ultimately it'll come back to you'll play more minutes, you'll get in rotation, you'll grow, you'll be able to develop, and then ultimately make more money and become the best version of you. So for him, would he be the best version of himself in college? I don't think he was a college player like that, honestly. He's been learning from his dad and the resources of his dad, like they're all NBA pro scouts and trainers. They don't really, they can, I guess train you predicated toward the college type of game, but ultimately you're making reads like a professional, coming up pick and rolls, making moves one-on-one. Like these situations and things that he plays in and the level of IQ and thinking he has is on a professional level. So, yes, could he benefit from it? Yeah, of course. Does it really matter? No. So ultimately it's like, what do you want to do? If this is what you want to do, you can do whatever. The sky's the world for you. You're not going to go broke. You don't have to worry about money. You're going to make that regardless of where you go. You can develop wherever you go. I think even more so in this type of system than it would be a college, collegiate system. Because the college game is just a different world for most people. And I think a lot of athletes, some of them flourish in the NBA, some don't. Some flourish in college. I just don't think he's the guy that's a college flourishing type player. I think he's more of an open court, NBA, G League overtime, overseas, something different. I don't think the college game is built for his game.
Yeah, that's a discussion for another day. I've been upset with the college game and how much it differentiates from the NBA game. And I think there's things that the college game can do to make it more appealing to stay around or an easier place to evaluate players from that are playing in college basketball. But that's neither here nor there. We got other things to talk about. Also want to talk about the Indiana Pacers, no longer in the NBA playoffs after getting swept by the Boston Celtics. Now, on one hand, Danny, you could say, well, they were still close games and they didn't have Tyrese Halliburton for the end of game 2, didn't have it for game 3 and 4. You could also say, well, they didn't have Benedict Mathurin. Pascal Siakam came in halfway through the season. So there's some positives there. And it feels as if Indiana is just going to run this team back. They'll re-sign Pascal Siakam to a max, but you hope Benedict Mathurin takes another step. You hope Tyrese Halliburton can sustain his level of play, not maybe at the highest of levels, but have a sustainability to his game that was absent this year. What do you think? What would you say are the prospects for the Indiana Pacers was this Eastern Conference final. Let's just say, Danny, they come back next year. Would them making the Eastern Conference Finals to you be a fluke, considering if Giannis and Dame are healthy, considering if the Knicks are healthy, considering if Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and whatever free agent they might add, we'll talk about that in a moment, is healthy as well. You expect a team like the Miami Heat to never necessarily fade away. Oh, and yeah, there's still the Boston Celtics. We don't know what's going to happen with the Cavaliers. It feels to me, Danny, that maybe next year they come back with, Eastern Conference Finals are better expectations. But this was their this could have very well been their opportunity to take advantage of the wounded warriors that surrounded the Eastern Conference.
They did. They took very much advantage, and they did what they were supposed to do. And this is probably the best that they'll be with this group until or unless they find another person. They need to find, and I think
who is that other person?
We'll talk about the people you mentioned that we'll talk about later in the show. I would like to talk about now. I think bringing in a Paul George type of person, bringing Paul George back to Indiana would not be a bad idea for this team. You have Pascal, but using guys like Benedict Mathurin, some of those pieces that you might not use all the time. They are deep, but you need another star ultimately, because Miles Turner, Tyrese Halliburton, they're good. So is Pascal. They're just not consistently on the same page always. And I think you need another person that can kind of carry that load offensively and defensively. But I'm not saying particularly Paul George, but him or someone like him, which I don't know who else is in that free agency pool that is like him, because there's not many like Paul George. Nope. You can find somebody for cheap. I've mentioned Miles Bridges before to you, another wing that can, play defense, can stretch the floor, run and gun, run and jump. Him and Obi Toppin are very similar. He's just another bigger body. So you have to add a couple. You can't take this season and think, we got what we need done. No, you need to add some things, change some things, and also get better with the pieces that you have. So they need to make some moves as well if they want to be Eastern Conference Finals again, like finalists, if they want to get back there. I think they need to add some things and figure it out. So this was a great year, hell of a year for them, but they did luck out and they benefited from, and even Tyrese said it, it's important. The teams that are healthiest, the ones that health is a important thing when it comes to winning games and then the playoffs. And they were the main ones to benefit from it. So, if they want to continue to trend in that direction, they got to get the younger guys better, but also find ways to add another good piece or two or find something great in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I think depth is becoming maybe something that is undervalued in the NBA that teams should really think about. The depth of this Indiana Pacers roster really allowed them to sustain levels of play that other teams simply just couldn't. And not having an over-reliance on certain players allowed this Indiana Pacers team to thrive and relatively stay healthy, even though, again, injuries are something that in many cases you cannot avoid. Lastly, before we go on to the Western Conference Finals, speaking of free agents, Paul George is a free agent. As of now, his current head coach, Ty Lue, has signed a contract extension to stay with the Los Angeles Clippers. Earlier this season, Kawhi Leonard signed a contract extension. I believe it was 3 years, $152 million. We don't know what's going to happen with James Harden, but we've seen multiple reports that the Philadelphia 76ers, Danny, your former team, are interested in Paul George and would offer him the max contract, but we've also heard reports that the Los Angeles Clippers are hesitant to give Paul George a max contract because they don't want to exceed what they've already given to Kawhi Leonard. And in many cases, in many people's view, Kawhi Leonard is the best player on the team. But Kawhi Leonard also comes with injury concerns that, frankly, aren't the same as Paul George. So I can understand if Paul George says, yeah, Kawhi might be our alpha A1, but can we rely on Kawhi to be our alpha A1? Why? I'm the most available. Yeah. So it's an interesting dynamic here, Danny. Let's just play the prediction game, because obviously
he has a very good argument.
We think Paul George should get paid. I don't think there's going to be a debate between 100%. You and I. But the question is, how does this play out for Paul George, which in many eyes is the number one free agent on the market, or could be the number one free agent on the market? We'll see if he opts out of his player option. Does Paul George stay with the Clippers and if he does he get more than Kawhi, the same amount than Kawhi? Does he leave for the Philadelphia 76ers and that max contract? Or is it C, another team comes in and maybe facilitates a sign and trade, i.e.
Indiana.
The New York Knicks could also be an option.
Knicks or Indiana, those other teams.
Yeah.
So
or even, you never know. Pat Riley is always lurking. How do you think it plays out? A, B, or C?
I see A happening. He deserves to get paid. He is the more available of the group. I know Clippers kind of want to bring back. I mean, Russ is under a cheap deal. I don't know what they're going to do with James Harden. That's going to be another interesting task or interesting challenge to figure out. I don't think Paul wants to leave Los Angeles. That's home for him. He wants to be there. Ultimately, I think he wants to stay there. If he does leave, it would be to Philly, who get offered. He's going to make more money there. Also, it's cheaper in Philly to live, taxes, all those things. Ultimately, if I think he wants to stay, he will get a contract. It won't be more than Kawhi's. It might be the same or a little bit less, and he'll do that just to stay home. I can see that happening. But yeah, for him, I think he go get. You know what I'm saying, go get your money. Better off going to a Philly or Indiana or Knicks and get your money. But if you're going to leave LA, you might as well go to a team that has a chance to win, or at least cheaper. Like, you're going to make the money. If you're going to leave for the money, go get the money and make more money. Be in Indiana where it's cheaper, or Philly where it's cheaper. New York isn't cheaper. You have a chance to do well in the East. So those are really good options. So yeah, I think he stays. But if he
end of the day, you think he stays with the Clippers?
And I think he stays with the Clippers. That's my prediction. But if he does leave, and if he were to leave, he should go. I think his best chance of winning with a tandem, I think his Philly is built more for his game.
Danny, you know how these games are played during the offseason. We all know how the story goes. Here's what I think is happening. I think on one, and again, this is not insider information, so don't aggregate what I'm saying here. But we just come on now. We all know better.
We're all GMs. We're talking. We have our opinions.
Yeah. Here's what's happening. The Clippers are saying, well, we gave Kawhi Leonard this contract extension. We don't feel that it's necessary to pay you more than Kawhi Leonard. Maybe we'll match that dollar figure. Maybe we'll give you an additional year, but we're not going to give you actually more money than Kawhi Leonard on a per year route or per year rate, because Kawhi Leonard is our best player. And so I feel sorry for Philadelphia 76ers fans. So, well, you know what Paul George's representatives do? They let the 76ers know that they're interested. Maybe that he has no intention of actually going, but here goes the good old leverage train, y'all. And now the Clippers have to think to themselves, yo, we might actually lose Paul George potentially for nothing.
Yeah.
And that's not going to sit well, particularly when you're the Los Angeles Clippers moving into a new arena in Inglewood, and you're trying to get somewhat of a footprint in the Los Angeles market. So eventually, some way, somehow, Paul George and the Clippers come together and they make it happen. I don't think the Clippers can afford to be this cheap, and I think Paul George knows that. All you need, Danny, and you know this, all you need is one team that's a realistic option that has the money to pay you to go back to the other side and be like, hey, I'm up out of here if y'all really not about this cash. And at that point, sides will cave in relatively to each other. There'll be some negotiating, but at the end of the day, Paul George, come on now. The man is from California. He gets to potentially play with Kawhi Leonard. Granted, Kawhi Leonard hasn't had the cleanest bill of health, but let's keep it real, y'all. Let's keep it real. Him going to the Philadelphia 76ers to play with Joel Embiid, who's consistently hurt in the playoffs too. So what are we talking about? It's the same. It's the same thing. Maybe just with more money. But I do think the Clippers give him the money eventually. That's how I think it plays out, but it'll be a fascinating thing all the way through, Danny.
I agree with you, man. You're a smart gentleman. That's why I do a podcast with you. And if I didn't have an agent, I'd make you my agent some days. You know what I'm saying? So you know what you're talking about, and you know the leverage game well. We know how today's game
We know how the leverage game goes.
Bro,
come on now.
He ain't going nowhere. But you Philly is leverage.
Nowhere. Sorry, Philly. That's how. That's what happens when you're a team with that much cap space. You're used as leverage. Eventually, now don't get it
same
twisted.
Colors.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. There's some player will take Philadelphia's money. They're not gonna just end up with all this cap space and not use it. Some player's gonna take it, but I don't think it's going to be Paul
George. I don't think it's going to be the player they want. I think it's going to be somebody they're going to have to give it to a couple of players that they're not going to be happy with giving it to. And the facility of Philly's going to be like, why the hell are we paying these guys? I don't think the big targets are wanting to go to Philly.
No, I
but
it's
a good team. It's a good situation for certain people, but I don't think that most of those guys would want to go there.
Yeah, if I'm a major, I caution some of my friends who are Sixers fans. I said, yo, it would be great to play with Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and Nick Nurse as a head coach. But if I'm intent on winning a championship, I also have to recognize the guy that I'm going to rely on, Joel Embiid, it's like 6 years in a row. He's way under the average bill of health that you would need for him to be at to win an NBA championship. Point blank, period. It's a real concern. Anyways, we'll be back. Western Conference Finals is our next topic. See you right after the break.
Cheers.
All right, what's up, everybody? We're back inside the green room. Danny Green, Harrison Sanford. You guys know the vibes. All right. If you're watching us on YouTube, you already know what you can do. Download the Audacy app, and you can listen to us on the go. If you have the Audacy app and you like to just sit by your computer, sit by your TV and watch us, we are on YouTube. A special programming note, the NBA Finals are coming up soon, y'all. June 6th, the first day is when it's happening, and Danny and I will be doing a show after every single NBA Finals game, breaking it down between the Boston Celtics and I think the Dallas Mavericks. But who knows, Danny? Game 4, we saw some things change up. We saw Anthony Edwards.
What the hell is
Anthony
happening?
Edwards became
Knock
the primary on Luka Doncic. He shot 5 of 15 during that game. Kyrie Irving, his primary defender, switched to Jaden McDaniels, and we saw Karl Anthony Towns enter the fray. Yes, he shot well from 3 in the second half, but in the first half, he went to the basket. Now, something to be noted about game number 4, Danny, it was the first game that the Mavericks played in this series without Derek Lively. And interestingly enough, you know, I like the numbers. If you go into the numbers, Luka Doncic had a +10 net rating with Derek Lively on the floor. Without Derek Lively on the floor for this series, he's in the negative in terms of net rating. So Derek Lively, a big piece. I assume he comes back, if not for game 5, for game 6, considering it's not too severe of a neck injury. With that being said, Danny, you're predicting that the Mavericks are still going to win. My question to you, when do the Mavericks win?
I said, different things on air. I hope Minnesota gets one more, but I think this is over next game. I think Dallas is going to win game 5 and call it a day. So ultimately, Cat had a great game. I don't know if he plays like that again. They're also getting more and more fatigued as each game goes on, mentally, physically, emotionally. And so they played well. Kai and Luka didn't have their best games. I think it's the first time Kai's lost an elimination game. The first time Luka didn't meet his numbers in elimination game.
Kyrie is now 14-1 in elimination games.
So, some things changed. And I think Derek Lively ultimately comes back. Even if he doesn't, I think they play better. They shoot better. They'll be a better team going into game 5. And I think they will close out. And also said Minnesota, I just don't count on Rudy and Cat having the same type of games.
But DG, yes, I believe the Mavericks will eventually win. Obviously, we've never seen a team come down from 0-3. But let's not forget, last year, what happened in the Eastern Conference Finals? Miami Heat went up 3-0.
Yeah,
the Celtics came back and forced to game 7. I would also say this too, Danny. It's not as if the Mavericks have been smacking around the Minnesota Timberwolves. Each game of this series has gone to clutch time. What happens?
And we know where Minnesota stands as crunch time team. They ranked 22 in the regular season in the fourth quarter crunch time. There's a reason why they're losing these games. They're going to be themselves. And it's not like the Boston Celtics. Boston Celtics were a better team than Miami, and they shouldn't have been down 0-3. Minnesota is a better – yes, talent-wise, they can be better if they play the way they're supposed to play. But they're not the better team yet because they just can't execute in the fourth quarter crunch time and mentally stay locked in. That ultimately is a character flaw of your group. That's who you are. That's your identity. And you're not going to win 3 games doing that.
Danny, I don't think it's out the realm of possibility that you finally get a good offensive and defensive game from the Minnesota Timberwolves without turnovers. Because if they didn't turn over the ball the way they did in game number 4, they very well could have won by double digits, bro. They
always going to turn the ball over. You know why?
30 points off turnovers.
Because they're not the brightest. They have a lot of dumb fouls. They have a lot of charges. They have a lot of bad shots. That's immaturity and youth. That's never going to change. It's going to change with growth, maturity, and progression. Not going to change in a series. That'll change in years. And maybe next year it'll change. But they're ultimately going to be them. And once again, it's going to come back to how well is Cat going to perform. Is he going to give you 18-plus points? Because when he does, they play way better. They win. Is Rudy going to play good defense and rebound and play his game and give you double figures? Is the others going to do the same? They might. But ultimately, they average 108 in the playoffs, and they hold the teams to 100 points. Dallas has still been scoring pretty well, and I see Kyrie and Luka be able to get that team to get 110, 115 points against it.
Here's what happens, Danny. The Minnesota Timberwolves have a double-digit win in game number 5. All the pressure comes on the Dallas Mavericks in game 6. 100%. And then the Dallas Mavericks win a clutch time game in game 6 to avoid a game 7. I think that's how it breaks out. The Minnesota Timberwolves are just too good of a team. I mean, no, that's not what I hope. I hope for a game 7. That's what I hope for.
The Boston Celtics are too good of a team too, but they still lost to Cleveland. They still almost lost to Indiana 3 times. They lost to Miami. There's a lot of teams that are too good of a team. They still don't perform the way they should perform because of multitude of things. And they're not the team that we've seen them in Denver. They're tired. They're young, inexperienced. They are good. We hope it plays out. We get more basketball because we don't have a week of not doing anything. But this series is over. This series is over.
I'm hoping against hope, and I want to see history made. And I don't know what the hell I'm going to do for a whole entire week with no basketball. So hopefully the Minnesota Timberwolves pull it out. We'll be back breaking that down sooner than later, y'all. Until then, he's Danny Green. I'm Harrison Sanford. This has been Inside the Green Room. Again, don't forget now, when the NBA Finals start, we'll have episodes after every single game. It's championship season, y'all. We'll be back next time around.
Peace. Read, rate, subscribe, review.